I'm Sarah Wilson and you're listening to the Roots and All podcast. I'm here to help you get growing. Join me as I explore everything plant related both indoors and out and provide the information you need to create your perfect green environment. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. This week I'm chatting to author of the book I Ate Sunshine for Breakfast, Michael Holland. The book is a botanical and environmental textbook for children that makes learning about even quite complex topics, such as plant scientific names, seem like fun. I talked to Michael about activities you can do with your children using stuff you can find in your cupboard, about some of the most engaging horticultural concepts for kids, and how you can make learning entertaining. I start by asking Michael how he got into horticulture himself.
I'm not technically a horticulturalist or horticulturist, depending on how you want to spell it and pronounce it. But I am an amateur gardener in my own free time. However, I've worked in horticultural settings for quite a long time, having been head of education at Chelsea Physic Garden, and before that, for the 7 years before that, I was working as in the same position, or same sort of place, but slightly different role there in the education department. So that's kind of with the sort of emphasis on environmental education, botanical education, and using the outdoors and obviously plants as inspiration for teaching people of all walks of life and all ages, from the ages of 2 to 92, about how they can create art and teach about geography and science and history and all sorts of different subjects. So that's the background. But within that, at the Physic Garden, I was very much surrounded by plants, surrounded by people talking about plants, and people not using common names, for example, which is an excellent discipline. Although common names have got their own interesting stories and backgrounds and origins. So in a world of taxonomy and propagation and all that sort of thing. So yeah, that's kind of a bit on my background in the sort of last 25 years. My parents were very, very keen gardeners. They were not quite self-sufficient, but they really grew a lot of their own food to make wine and vegetables and jams and all that sort of stuff. So that was in my upbringing quite a lot as well. So I was encouraged to pursue any natural directions, really, and ended up studying ecology at university, which is a very broad science, which gives kind of a nice overall grounding to the world, really.
So was it your own interest in horticulture as a child that inspired you to write a book for children?
Well, I was greatly inspired as a child by a book called The Picked Book by Keith Mossman, about how to save and propagate things from date seeds through to orange pips and kumquats and whatever it might have been. And the airing cupboard was quite an interesting place, not always successful. But I was actually, I'd always thought I'd quite like to write a book, and I'd written things in my previous jobs for children, resources for teachers and so forth, but nothing quite as substantial as a book. And then I was actually approached whilst at the Physic Garden by a mum who was on a family activity day that I was leading, and at the end of it she just said, "I really like the way you communicate about plants. My kids are really switched on to plants now, and they really never were before. There's a real dearth of plant books aimed at children. My husband runs a publishing company. Would you like to get in touch?" And it kind of went from there. It was very lucky, serendipitous. I was very lucky, rather. So, and then 5 years later, we finally have it on our shelves, but not bookshelves, because obviously bookshops are shut.
No, indeed. Was it? I mean, you spoke about the use of common names, and as you say, that is interesting in its own right. But one thing that struck me about your book was that you although it looks beautiful and it's a really good, fun, vibrant look to it, you do actually talk about things like scientific names of plants, and you don't shy away from that. And I think I like the fact that it does have its roots in science and botany as well as being fun. Was that deliberate, and was it important?
Yes, and yes. I wrote approximately 40,000 words for the original draft, and about half of that was edited out, or maybe book 2, who knows. But one of the things I really am very glad that this was a sort of back and forth with myself and the editors was about whether scientific names should be left in. And I was absolutely, I mean, I see this as a textbook, and actually obviously a very beautiful textbook, because Philip's done an amazing job bringing it to life in colours and all that sort of thing. But I thought it was very important, because actually if it's going to be sold in Australia and America and the UK and across Europe, that's where that could be, this is sort of the slippery slope using a common name for a plant, because what does one person call a daisy might be 7 different species, but there's only one Bellis perennis. So that's it was really important. And actually they thought, well, it's too highbrow to put scientific names in, and then actually they agreed actually towards the end that actually they saw the sense in it. So I'm really glad they stayed in. So that's a very long answer, but I'm really glad they stayed in, because it does give it that scientific gravitas, but also, especially when, I mentioned medicinal plants in there. If you're going to be making something, boiling it up and putting it into your body to make yourself better for whatever it might be, you've got to get the right plant. And this is one of the key messages I got from the Physic Garden, that 95% of the plants on the planet Earth are poisonous. You've got to get the right plant. You can't make mistakes when you're treating yourself or someone else. So that's where the scientific name, there's only one Calendula officinalis, but there's lots of things called marigolds. So yeah, you've got to just, that's a gentle example, but there's some quite hardcore pharmaceutical poisons really, which you wouldn't want to, well, not that most people would be treating themselves with belladonna and taxus and things like that. But anyway, yes. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that what's interesting is that kids aren't scared of names like that. I think it's only because you don't learn them more as a child that when you come to them as an adult, your brain kind of boggles and you go, oh my God, look at that ridiculously long word. But kids just have the capacity to absorb that information. And when you get it in when it's young, then it's there and they're kind of used to dealing in it. So I think it's really important. But I also was interested in the book was that you have that kind of ecological thread running through it. You can definitely see your background. And again, was that important to touch on the sort of environmental aspects of horticulture?
Definitely. I don't think anyone really likes being preached at about how they live their lives and so forth. But just to put some things into context, I thought it was really important just to, someone who studied ecology, someone who lives reasonably sort of gently on the earth, as it were, try not to have too much of an impact, try to be quite resourceful and reuse and recycle and all that sort of thing. I've got to kind of, I suppose, preach what I practice in a way, if I've got to put it that way. But so absolutely, just even bringing to life the work of Rachel Carson in the maybe 60s or 50s, whenever she was pioneering the idea of environmentalism and the consequences of agricultural pollution, and just a few other bits and bobs on how we can kind of just reduce our footprint, how we can reduce our footprint on the planet and just live as part of nature and not some sort of superhuman being. So yeah, it was nice to be able to do that. And that kind of came through because of the title I Ate Sunshine for Breakfast. That really kind of says that plants are part of a food chain starting with the sun, and then it kind of goes from there, and then you spin off into all the different other uses of plants.
We do hear a lot about how children are more disconnected from nature now. Obviously, you've got hands-on experience of teaching children sort of directly. Is that your experience personally?
I mean, I quite like children you get this sort of idea, and you're saying about long-winded scientific plant names, but then, loads of children know incredibly complicated dinosaur names fluently. But there are certain things that I've noticed children are really switched on to if they're into sort of nature and that sort of thing, natural history, and it is dinosaurs is absolutely one of them. When it comes to plants, quite a lot of children I've met are basically, right, plants are all the same, but that's where us environmental educators come in, botanical educators come in and can actually say, well, actually they're all different. How many have you used today since you got out of bed? How many have you used in the last 24 hours for this? You're wearing a plant. You had plants in your breakfast cereal. I've had 50 plants, or 50 plants have helped me since I got out of bed, and it's only 10 o'clock. And that's my shampoo. It's my conditioner. It's the I don't know, the wheels of my bicycle made of rubber, or the soles of my shoes, or the paper I'm writing notes on, or all kinds of things. And bringing it to life and making it relevant, I think that's the key word, is good for everyone. It opens up the whole world of plants to everybody, really, that aspect of the relevance. And it also, a few things I've noticed working in a botanical garden setting, taking groups of youngsters around, they love carnivorous plants, this idea of plants biting back or fighting back, eating flies and even rats and monkeys in extreme conditions. Cacti and succulents, things that can go for, spiky giant things that can go for 100 days without a drink of water, and the idea of poisons, and also that weird paradox that poisons, if they're used in the right way, are actually medicines. And that's sort of mind-blowing in itself, I think. Those are some of the things that we found engaging.
I did have a question actually scheduled for later on, but it's come up nicely there. And I think I'm going to put you on the spot a bit. It's quite a difficult one. But if you could choose just one fact or maybe an activity or an anecdote that would really reel a child into horticulture, what would be your most kind of show-stopping one?
Wow, that's a difficult one. So one fact, activity or anecdote. Well, I mean, the idea that there's 20,000 plants. No, it's not so. 20,000 species of plants out of 400,000 are edible, which is only 5%. That's one thing. I think the seeds. What is a seed? And I think one of the things I mentioned in the book is the coco de mer seed from Seychelles grows on only 2 of the hundreds of Seychelles islands, and it can grow up to the size of 22 kilograms. But yet the smallest seed in the world is from a species of tropical orchid, and the seed is only 1,000th of a gram, and it just floats in the air like dust. And just the idea that both of them are effectively the same in that they both contain the blueprint for life, although different species, obviously. But just that concept of what is a seed, I think, and such a huge, 22 million times heavier than each other. I think that sort of idea, almost like seeds are time capsules. I think that might be, that concept probably would be one amazing fact, especially if you've got a coco de mer seed handy to show them, because it's hilarious because it looks like a big bottom.
I bet they love that. So in the book, you do discuss some experiments that people can do with their kids. What's your personal favourite experiment to do?
Well, I mean, there's 12 do-it-yourself activities in the book. And I mean, my 8-year-old daughter just keeps going on about the cornflower slime, which is quite good. I'm quite a messy person, but sometimes I don't really like doing the messy activities, although I've got a garden, so I could probably do it out there. The cornflower slime is quite a good one, quite easy. It's just basically cornflower and water, and food coloring if you dare. And it just makes this really freaky, weird slime that is hard if you hit it or try and crack it, but it just flows through your fingers if you stop. It's like quicksand. It's quicksand for the hand. So that's quite a weird one. And it's got kind of scientific and engineering spin-offs, I suppose. But I mean, then there's much more sort of. There's quite a nice one using sage leaves and an ink pads where you just print with sage leaves, either the top or the underside of the sage leaf, cooking sage that is, and it really just makes very, very beautiful prints on bookmarks and greetings cards. So that's sort of a different, I suppose, if we were thinking curriculum level, that's a different curriculum area really. But I think those are two of my favourite ones.
And I noticed on your blog that you've got something called the Shelf Life Project. I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, as I just finished answering that last question, I just suddenly remembered Shelf Life. So yes, I mean that's something that's kind of most dear to my heart in a way, because it's a bit of my Chelsea Physic Garden legacy in a way. Going back to about 2003, I had this realization that actually one really good way of demonstrating the plants that we have in our lives is by planting seeds directly into the packaging that we'd otherwise recycle or throw away, like a haricot bean in a baked bean tin, or a tomato plant growing out of a ketchup bottle, etc., etc. And horticulturally, I've got to say, it's cruel and it's crass. Educationally, it just is. You can't beat it in a way, because it just literally says what it does on the tin. And that's one of the that's been brought into the book as well. So yeah, I mean I probably take back my answer from the previous question and say Shelf Life may well be my favourite, because it's got that longevity, it's a recycling, it's quite sustainable activity, but it immediately shows that link, and it's quite quirky. I mean, I've got some in the shed with me now. I've got lemon plants growing out of a lemonade bottle, and a tin of tomatoes with a young tomato plant in it, and it's lovely to see it. But yeah, obviously you're not going to get any huge crops out of small containers, but it's a bit of fun.
Are there any seeds that people could do that I mean, if I think things are getting slightly better, but there has been a slight problem sourcing seeds. Are there any particularly good ones that people could harvest from things that they might have in their kitchen?
Definitely, yeah. Tomatoes. I mean, things that are actually in the dried goods section of your kitchen, as it were, of your kitchen cupboard, such as brown lentils, green lentils, dried chickpeas if you have them, kidney beans. All of those things would grow quite easily. When you're squeezing a lemon into a salad or a drink or whatever it might be, nearly all lemons have got pips in them. They will grow so easily. Tangerines, oranges, grapefruits, all citrus fruits. Limes don't have seeds I can't quite work out why. It must be grafted, or I don't really know why. But yeah, all of those, butternut squash, anything with seeds in it probably would grow reasonably easily. And it's quite fun to try. I mean, obviously, when it comes to lemons and those sorts of things, we're fairly unlikely to be very patient and maybe wait 20, 25 years before you get any fruit. So something like tomatoes and chilies and butternut squash, you can get seeds within. You can get something edible out of it by the end of this year if you start now. So yeah, I mean, really, really quite easy, and that's where the Pip book comes in. Really, and I highly recommend. It's out of print, but I do recommend that book. It's quite fun. It can be available on second-hand websites. Yeah, give it a go, basically.
Yeah, that one sounds brilliant. I'm tempted to try that myself. Do you need to be mindful with children of managing expectations, or do you find, I mean, I think sometimes the problem with gardening for adults is that they try something that they've seen somewhere which looks really easy, then they find out that it's actually not as easy as it looks in maybe a step-by-step guide in a magazine, and they get disheartened. Do children need to have that, managed, or are they kind of more, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a way of putting it, are they more likely to, kind of move on to the next thing of interest, so they don't mind if maybe their tomato plant doesn't get hundreds of tomatoes on it?
I mean, I think with whatever age the person is, whether a child or an adult or somewhere in between, I do think it depends on the person's temperament, to be honest. However, I think we all know that hopefully gardening teaches us a certain level of patience, as do other activities and experiments, and hopefully that would be one life lesson that we all leave this earth with, is that we've sort of worked out that not everything works, and if at first it don't succeed, then try and again, or all that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think children, depends on their attention spans, to be honest. Some are more stoical than others. Some are more persistent than others. I wouldn't want to generalize every child into the same category, to be honest. But yeah, I think definitely gardening can teach us patience. I've 2 weeks ago I planted a whole load of seed potatoes. I've prepared all these lovely new beds in my garden, and nothing's popped up. Everything I've planted around them's popped up, and not the potatoes. So I'm thinking I should be digging it out, but I know that it's there, and I know it just needs a little bit more time. So I'm trying to do that for myself as well, so just exercise a little bit of patience. I mean, disasters. I've struggled with. There's one experiment in my book which is getting a light bulb to light up using the power of potatoes and cables and zinc or galvanized nail and copper coins and fairly everyday household-ish items, except for the cables. And it worked when I did it originally, and I just can't get it to work again. So that's definitely one I want to kind of conquer, I think. And once I do, I'll do a little short video of it and a tutorial, I think. I definitely want to experiment with that. I've read something on the BBC website that there were, I think in Israel, some experimenting with potato power. Actually, lighting places that are off grid, lighting buildings using potatoes, which just sounds hilarious.
Yeah.
But I mean, I suppose if you're in a dark enough place, you could light the place up. If you have enough of them, and you have to sort of wire them up in circuits. But they work better if you boil them for 8 minutes, because that breaks down the cell walls and allows the electricity to flow through more. So that's, I mean, that could get really messy and smelly. Just looking around in my shed now, thinking I could do some potato, but that could be a real, literally a messy mashup.
Well, I'm gonna be waiting for your tutorial with bated breath, because that was the one that I fancied doing out of the book. I thought that one looked brilliant. So there are a lot of people, I think, at home at the moment who are having to a degree, educate their children and keep them amused. Obviously, your book is very good for that. Do you know of any other places online that might be useful, especially for education purposes, around horticulture?
Well, I just saw yesterday that the Field Studies Council, FSC, they are doing some online lessons for primary and secondary schools. I think, to be honest, anyone who's already doing this sort of thing, whether it's the Royal Horticultural Society, Kew Gardens, Chelsea Physic Garden, just saw today on Twitter that they're a lot of the lesson plans that I'd helped devise and worked on and written the content for, and we trialed throughout 2019 and into early 2020 are now all in digital form. So yeah, I think a lot of people are changing tack because of this coronavirus situation. And I think, in a way, I mean, if we're going to think silver linings, I think it's actually catalyzed quite a lot of organizations maybe to really up their game when it comes to digital online offerings. However, having said that, you can't beat the actual going in through the glass houses and walking around the garden and getting doing some pond dipping and looking at dragonfly nymphs and leeches and stuff in real life. It's the hands-on side, and obviously some of that people can do in their own homes, but you can't recreate a vast botanical garden in someone's home. You have to really use your imagination if you're just doing it virtually. But a lot of the activities are easily things that can transfer over. So those are the ones I've seen so far that I've mentioned. I've tried a little bit on my own website, Growing Understandings, just to create a little bit of content, whether it's making a paper aeroplane that will come back to you every time you throw it to impress your friends when you do go back to school, or whatever it might be. And just a few top tips and tricks, but I'm still adding to that whenever I can.
So if people wanted to reach you, would Growing Understandings be the place to find you?
Yeah, growingunderstandings.co.uk. It's a fledgling website. I only went freelance at the beginning of February, so I'm only sort of 2 or 3 months in at this point of the situation. By now, I thought I was going to be well in the way of traveling Britain on a lengthy book tour, but that's on hold until maybe the autumn. So I'm much more, along with everyone else, homebound, and trying to furnish the website whilst also furnishing my lovely new shed. I've learned some new skills. I've got blisters and aches in places that I didn't know I had.
Oh, well, as you say, silver linings. We're all going to come out of this with lovely gardens and homes.
Exactly.
How's your home and garden looking at the moment? My garden has never received so much attention, which really isn't saying much at all, as it's usually so neglected. A big thank you to Michael for taking part in the interview. My heart goes out to all the authors who've released books recently and have had to cancel their book tours. It's great they're still able to get online exposure, but it must take some of the fun out of what should be an exciting time. Speaking of books, you can win a copy of I Ate Sunshine for Breakfast. All you have to do is follow me on one of my social media channels, so that's @RootsandAll on Twitter, or @RootsandAllPod on Instagram, or RootsandAll UK on Facebook, and either direct message or @ me and tell me a story about something you've grown or tried to grow from seed. So that's it. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll catch you all next Tuesday. You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website www.rootsandall.co.uk, where you'll also find my blog and a sign-up form for the newsletter, which gives you a weekly roundup of content, plus the inside scoop on things like upcoming guests. Or you can subscribe wherever you normally get your podcasts. Email me with comments and feedback at podcast@rootsandall.co.uk. Follow me on Twitter, Roots and All, Facebook, Roots and All UK, and Instagram, Roots and All Pod. But please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support my work, because if you like what I do, please help me to continue doing it. Even if you make a one-off donation of £1, trust me, it all helps, and I will be immensely grateful. So please go to Patreon and search for Roots and All.